Good evening. Hi, everybody. Thank you. Interactive, I love it. So on behalf of the School of Graduate Studies and the Cosmetics and Fragrance Marketing and Management Master's Program, also known as the Beauty Industry's Think Tank for Innovation, it's my pleasure to welcome all of you to the Fashion Institute of Technology for tonight's relevant, timely, and very inspiring book launch and discussion. I see many of our Beauty Think Tank alumni here tonight, woohoo, as well as current students and so many industry friends. I admire all of you for your unwavering dedication and contributions in advancing the beauty industry. I'm very pleased to announce one of CFMM program's alumna, Morgan Hagney, who is very near and dear to me. She graduated in the class of 2017, has risen to the position of Assistant Vice President, Sustainability Lead of Consumer Products Division of L'Oreal USA, and she's an adjunct professor of communications in the program and also the president of the Cosmetics and Fragrance Alumni Association. Needless to say, she's a valued contributor to the CFMM program. So enjoy the evening. Morgan?
Hi, everyone. How is everyone doing? Good. It's incredible to see all of you here tonight. Thank you so much for coming. Believe it or not, this is the first official CFMM event we've had in person since 2020. And a lot has happened since. And I'm not just talking about the pandemic or that Dr. B is now the dean of the School of Graduate Studies. Whoop, whoop. I'm talking about the massive cultural shift that's happening. I think we all feel it. And it's the shift that we're seeing in our workplace. Leadership and employee expectations have changed, and we're prioritizing community, vulnerability, and psychological safety. And it's influencing how we show up at work. And it feels more important now than ever for us to rely on each other, to lift each other up, and create an environment where we all feel safe to bring our full selves to the office. So while tonight's topic may be about work and pregnancy, it's important for all of us to have this conversation, regardless of whether or not you have children. I encourage all of you to think about how we can continue to develop safe and equitable working communities where everyone is truly seen, heard, and valued, no matter their circumstance. So without further ado, it is my honor and privilege to introduce Stephanie Kramer, our newly appointed Chief Human Resources Officer at L'Oreal, my previous professor, and my more recent co-professor at FIT. She has been featured as a speaker at several colleges and universities, including the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania and Harvard University. She is a member of the FIT board, a proud mother of 2 young children, and now an author of her latest book, Carry Strong. I'm not sure what she's going to do next, but I'm sure we'll add more to that list. She is a testament that we can truly do it all, not at the same time, and absolutely not alone. Stephanie is a woman I know so many of us in this room look up to. She's always taken a people-first approach in every role that she's had. Beyond leadership, beyond the business, she's always prioritized being human and lifting up those around her, no matter how many plates she's spinning at once. She's a bright light, a force of nature, and a role model for so many women. I'm honored to call her my friend, so please welcome Stephanie Kramer, the author of Carry Strong.
That happened. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Carlson. Thank you, Professor Canlian. Thank you, Morgan. Thank you to all of you that are here. Thank you if you came because you're part of the FIT current students, if you're a member of the alumni, if you're coming for you because this topic's important for you, or if you just came for me. So actually, before I get started, how many of you came from a pregnant person? Awesome, so great. Everyone has some skin in the game in this topic. I know it's a really tricky one. Like, really want to go here and talk about pregnancy? Maybe this is like so far away for you, or maybe it's super close in. But it's a really important one. And by the way, it's also true that how many of you have worked with a pregnant person? All right, so 85% of working women will become mothers during their career. That's a pretty big number. So if you're imagining 50% of our workforce and 85% of those having an impact, there's a guarantee that you have someone on your team. There's also 35 million working mothers, which is why it's a force to be reckoned with, in the US. Also, I want to recognize while I'm using the term working mothers, that's the term that most was commonly used in the research, but that doesn't exclude all the ways that people become parents, caregivers, and in fact, even how you identify yourself as a birthing person. 80% of millennials will be parents by 2026. So you get the point, it's pretty big. There's also 3.6 million babies born every year, and by the way, that's a huge ecosystem of support around them. So I could have also started with a question of how many of you know a baby, but it's pretty important, and the intersection of work is going to continue. So that's the big picture. But what's also important is my perspective. Why am I having this talk? So when I started putting together these slides, thank you FIT communications classes, I went back 10 years. And in fact, there's stories in the book, by the way, you can hear about me in middle school if you really want to know. Spoiler alert. But 2013 was when I got pregnant, then not pregnant, and then pregnant with my first son. I worked at Chanel in a fully supported environment with paid maternity leave, with this very supportive husband, and yet, even recalling this to all of you right now, my voice is shaking. I had the advantage of being a professor at FIT starting in 2015. Then I switched, I came back to L'Oreal, and I gave a TED Talk called Push about working women in pregnancy. Then, pregnant, unpregnant, pregnant again, and had my son James. And in fact, I reflect on this picture that's here in the middle. That's actually when I'm pregnant with James and William's on my lap, and the last time I went to take your children to work day in 2018. So then something happened. I don't know if you remember, but between 2013 and 2023, it was a pretty big moment for all of us. It was the biggest disruption in the way we worked ever for all of us. In terms of health, in terms of fear, uncertainty, changing are we going to show up the next day? Are we going to have companies at all? And we saw all of these headlines. Our economy cannot recover fully unless women participate. The pandemic forces more women to leave the workplace. The pandemic opened up so much for all of us, not just the children on the lap during the Zoom meeting, although that was really important, but the tremendous hidden burden of caregivers within the workplace. And this is when I started to feel a sense of responsibility from my own personal experience, from all of the mentorship and advice I'd had behind closed doors with some of you that are in this room, and also because I saw this picture on the right. So this is Mandy Trujo. She is a nurse from St. Louis, and Mandy needed to go back to work after a very short maternity leave after having her child during the pandemic. She's a primary caregiver, primary breadwinner, and in fact, you see she stopped to take this picture. She took this picture in clean PPE to capture this moment, a moment where she's providing for her child, she's taking care of people during one of the most fearful, intense medical events of our entire history, and she looks so damn strong. And for me, and by the way, I saw this picture in Glamour for International Women's Day and over again, it was so incredibly powerful. And later, I sent her a note, and I said, I just want to tell you how damn strong you were in that picture. And she said, the crazy part is, I didn't feel that way, but now, every time I look at that, I cannot feel anything but pride. I thought, wow, okay, there's something powerful. Your hindsight is someone else's foresight. So from that moment, from that picture, in the pandemic, you see me here, and my husband Cooper is here, and he can attest to this. I'm using an ironing board as a standing desk. That is a box of diapers to prop up the computer in the right direction. And I said, okay, if I feel this way, with all of my privilege, if the world is experiencing this, what am I going to do about it? Not just behind closed doors, but how can I really have an impact? So I decided to do some research. I'm a scientist by background. So I decided to say, okay, let me write a grant, which I've never done before. All right, so I'm going to reach out to a research company. I don't know how much this is going to cost. I don't know what it's going to be. And they said yes. For my first study of 400 women who worked full-time when they were pregnant. No one's ever done that type of research. And they said, guess what? We're going to pay for it, and we have members of our team that want to participate, and they're going to help you. Okay, that was number one. It snowballed from there. And I have received the most powerful groundswell of support so that I can help create it too. People have given so generously of their advice, maternal health experts. We've had female founders. You have CEOs, influencers. There's so many amazing women on this slide. Olympic athletes. They're giving not just their perspective, they're giving their personal stories, generously, deliberately, things that are incredibly private moments because they want to have an impact. The result is my book, Carry Strong, which launches on May 23rd during the month of Mothers. The cover is bright blue. When I told Penguin, I said, you know what? I think baby colors are a good idea, but what if baby colors were super proud? And they were like, okay, what does this look like? I was like, no, more, bright pink, bright yellow, blue sky of ambition and strength, but also the fact that these lines are concurrent. So you see a subtle shape, but that's because when you decide you want to have children, your career doesn't stop. So why do we keep treating it that way? These are two parallel lines that can have a benefit. Doesn't mean that it's not hard, but for me, it was really important to say that there was a different way to approach this topic that is cultural constant. So here's the result. There are 5 principles and 5 phases. And in the book, they're actually presented so that you first have the phases, I first have the principles, and then you have the phases. The principles are things that are applicable to you no matter who you are. And in fact, I've used the same principles, and my chief of staff is here. I've used the same principles on a lot of different talks, so just don't give it away. So let's start with the phases. There are 5 phases, and this has never been talked about in this way before. But sometimes just giving the language makes it feel a little bit less scary, lets you have kind of a conversation around it. So first phase is the BTTC, that's before trying to conceive. I interviewed 2 studies, one of 150 college-age women and one of 150 college-age men about what they thought the perception would be, what they thought the impact of parenthood would be on their career. So that happens in the BTTC. Then there's trying to conceive. That's the second phase. Nobody talks about that impact on work, but you're going to see in the numbers that 1 out of 2 people in my first study said that trying to conceive, not yet being pregnant, had an impact on their career. And I venture to guess if you talk to any of your friends that they would say the same thing. Then you move from the BFP. I use some of the terms that people like to use on old school message boards, but now use in social media. The BFP is the big fat positive or the big F word positive, depending on your mood. And then you move into a really interesting phase, and this is called the hush. And for me, this is an incredibly tenuous time. There's a lot of joy, but there's a lot of secrecy, and there's a lot of weight. And in fact, we're in infertility awareness. On the 23rd was the day, we're in that week. It's a pretty big time, can have a pretty big impact. For some people, it can be a day. They decide, I'm pregnant, I'm going to share my news right away. Other people, it can be weeks. In fact, myself, which was not the best advice, I waited until 20 plus weeks. I think everybody else knew. But I just wasn't ready to share my news, so I was in that hush for a really long time. Then you move into the big tell. This is something that people actually do Google, so there are a tremendous number of searches of how to tell my boss I'm pregnant. Tons! But that is the only advice, and in fact, they're not really great advice, so I decided that maybe I should make something that can help you to answer that question. Then you move into the push, so from private pregnancy to public pregnancy towards your due date, and then the last phase is called anticipating the great return. There are a lot of excellent resources for parents and caregivers about work, and in fact, a lot about return to work. Nobody had really done all the before, so I consider my role as the handoff. So I can be like, okay, great, here's some awesome books that you can use later. But how can you anticipate what you might need so you can ask work or you can have the conversation before you get there? Can you imagine if instead of being so worried throughout your maternity leave while you're trying to take care of a newborn, while you're trying to enjoy that moment, if you didn't have to be worried if you were going to have a space to breastfeed when you came back? Game changer. So here are a few of those highlighted stats. 92% of college-age women in a study in 2021, this is not old news, said that motherhood would have an impact on their career. And I'd venture a guess that it probably should be 100%, because regardless if you choose that or not, there is a notion of perception. And by the way, I jumped to that this was negative. It's actually pretty neutral for those women. There's extremes. Know that they saw this as a negative and they saw this as a positive. And then 1 out of 2 in 2021 said it had an impact on their choice of major. And in fact, afterwards, I did focus groups with a bunch of different women in colleges around the country and men. And I asked them why on this number. And they were like, no one's ever asked me that before, but of course I thought about it, for the 1 out of 2, which is really interesting. If you think about yourself, like, did I ever really think about that? Well, you might have thought about what type of hours you wanted to have or what type of job or how mobile you wanted to be. But asking the question was a forcing function that was really important. We ask people all types of things about what they want for themselves at work. If parenthood is going to happen to 85% of them, wouldn't it be great if we at least had a conversation so it wasn't weird? This is where I talked about the 1 out of 2 impact. And then the last part, when we're in the hush, is it's about 50-50. So 49% of women were comfortable to very comfortable. That's great news. Then you have 36% somewhat and 16% uncomfortable. So you're like, okay, that's not so bad. That's great. We have the majority of people that are comfortable. If you have something that is impacting 16% of your workforce, then maybe we should pay attention. Then you move into the push. 49% of women experienced a change in their self-confidence. And for me, this was so critical. I had heard the stories, the tough ones, but I'd also heard so many incredibly positive ones. Some of the stories that I had heard as I was doing the interviews, one woman said, I said, who would you like to thank? So there were these key questions I asked everyone. Who would you like to thank for support during this time? And she said, myself. And I was like, yeah, there is a surge of confidence that happens. And in fact, that can be so propelling. Like, what power comes from that? So while it's always framed as something we have to get through, what if instead it was something that was propelling us? And my goal isn't to completely change, like, oh my gosh, everybody should get pregnant for it's good for their career. But wouldn't it be great if headlines like pregnancy is a career killer, which is a real deal, and I have seen this year and I saw 10 years ago, didn't continue to exist? When you're seeing a surge in confidence, in fact, you see that there's overperformance of parents in general in the workplace. Then 48% of women who worked during pregnancy said their experience had an impact on their decision to work. It's a pretty big percentage too, 1 out of 2. And the last here is a study, my final study was 600 people, men and women with and without children, answering the question, are parents an asset? And you see here that 54% shared that they were an asset, the highest of all 3 options, 42% neutral, and there were only 5% that were a risk. And I will tell you, in breaking down subsegments, which I have on all of this data, so by gender, by ethnicity, by type of location of work, men with children are the most likely to say that parents are an asset in the workplace, and women without are the most likely to say that they are not. So moving into the 5 principles. The first is perspective, reframing your reality with a paradigm shift, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Balance, deciding to have it all, not at the same time. The most important word in that is actually deciding to have it all, which is why it's so important to have an empowered approach. Community, choosing the company you choose. That's a fun pun. I love puns. The company around you and also the organizations you choose to work with. In fact, 2 of the women that I interviewed for the book, Lola and Pilar, they decided to take a year off of Brown and Stanford during the pandemic because they decided to help support the caregiver burden that was happening. And then after that, they decided to create a charter for Gen Z to sign up for what they demanded of employers so that someday they could become caregivers. I was like, these are my type of girls. Next, communication, creating confident and comfortable conversations. Now, my students that are here know that it's not about telling everyone how they should behave. It's making you confident in how you want to communicate your news, which is really, really big difference. And then the last is identity. Major shift happens. Sometimes you want to say that nothing has happened, and other times everything has happened. I like to find myself somewhere between the two, but identity is a powerful theme. So there are 3 things, and you may have heard me talk about these before, but I'm going to give you a little bit of something for you, and then also how this relates to pregnancy and work. The first is the traffic light. All right, I want you to imagine a moment in your career. Could be right now, but you're all going to know a moment that happened in your career. And you have only 3 choices. So how are you feeling? Are you green? Are you in the zone? Are you like, you know what, I've got this. This is great, I feel good for a while. Or, and by the way, if you're green and you're pregnant, you don't have to lose that. It doesn't go away. Take stock of what that is. Is it the role itself? Is it the people around you? Is it the challenge? Is it the place of work? Is it other things in your life that are making that green happen for you? Note it. It's really important. You want to try to stay in that green zone. But then there's yellow light. All right, so there's a switch that happens, and I'm sure many of you have a moment that you can think of. It's kind of a stuck feeling. You're stuck at a yellow light. Do you go and you have this hesitation? If you have that yellow feeling, it can happen every once in a while, and it's okay. It might be a day. It might be something else going on. It might affect your job or not. But it's a sign. It's something to slow down, yield to, and think about what that is. And if it happens with a tremendous amount of frequency, guess where you're heading? Into a red light. And that is where you cannot stay, particularly with regards to things that impact your life. It's a huge, huge red flag, and that means you need to have an action. So the next is a concept called work-life fluidity, which I very much prefer to work-life balance, and I actually even prefer to work-life harmony. The idea is that it's a more fluid approach. How many of you have changed your shoes on a sidewalk in New York City? Okay, yeah, I did it 2 days ago, and I was thinking about this. It's super uncomfortable. It's unbalanced. You're trying to not step on the ground. That is balance. You do yoga for balance. We strength train for balance. Balance, try to have a seesaw. Trying to balance a seesaw is not very fun. You try to move it up and down. So why are we striving so much for balance and giving so much credit to work? I know I probably shouldn't say this, I'm the head of HR. We should giving so much credit to work against life. Why? Why are we striving for something like that? Instead, if you have a fluid approach, that means where I am right now is where I'm focused. When I am home, I need to fully focus in that moment, and I catch myself on that. Instead of always feeling like I'm failing, I try to imagine shifting throughout my day, shifting throughout a week. Sometimes if I have a work trip and I'm gone for the whole week, yes, I miss my kids. Yes, I try to anticipate that feeling. But I also recognize that that's where I am right now, and that's where I'm adding value in that moment. So then there's this idea of COMO versus FOMO. So how many of you have heard of FOMO? Probably the same number who know a pregnant person, right? Okay, great. How many of you have heard of COMO? Probably from me. Okay, that's great. So actually, I heard it from someone else to give them full credit, but I very much embrace this. This is an essence of work-life fluidity. COMO means certainty of missing out. Instead of always going through your day of having constant FOMO, what am I missing? Instead, you have a moment where you say, I am certainly missing out. So I am certainly missing this moment right now. Right now, though, I am certainly here. Was I able to, after take your children to work day, take my kids home? No. But I don't have FOMO about it anymore. Just certainty. And it's so freeing to think that way and have a mindset shift. And if you can start thinking about that now, when you have to make those choices of responsibility, it can be a game changer. The next one is about your board of directors, and I have many board of directors members here. What is a board of directors? Well, a board of directors, first of all, you have them around you when you need them, right? They're hired, which is important. They can be kicked off your board also. You can change some positions. Some are emeritus. Some people just stay no matter what. They're a board too, so they tell you things that you don't necessarily want to hear, and that's their job. But they can also be your mentors, they can be your mentees, they can be your allies and your advocates. And you're creating a community of support around you. And you need that right now, no matter where you are in your career, no matter where you are in your life. You need to have that board of directors you can rely on, and it can evolve. Now, when you're going through a major life event like pregnancy or deciding to become pregnant, do you have someone you can aspire to have that conversation? Do you have someone that doesn't have children you can have the conversation with on your board? Do you have someone that you can pressure test that fear of perception? It's really important to maintain and take care of that board. And by the way, to participate in it. So here, being generous goes both ways. Encourage all of you to be generous and participate in those boards, but be generous with those board members too. Patience, appreciation, gratitude, time, and be deliberate. Not everyone you meet is going to be a mentor. That's just not authentic, and nor is there enough time. They could be somebody that you want to check in with or have coffee with, but they're not necessarily a guarantee to be a mentor or a mentee, an ally or an advocate, one of the strongest of the force. But imagine that community of sport around you. Check in with them. So I share that last point because overall, what I want to do is flip the script on this cultural constant, utilizing real, authentic stories, using hindsight as foresight, data, and the collective groundswell that's happening right now. But this is also about all of us. So what I ask in the end of the book is actually everyone who reads it, what are you going to do? Because I can tell you, for me, my kids 10 years ago, I really could have used a little bit more of kind of the support behind. I had it in pockets, but I couldn't only imagine if it was that full amount of support that I felt when I was interviewing these women publicly. So all of us here are leaders. We're leaders in an industry that supports women, that champions them in the beauty industry. What can we all do? If you don't have that mentor, be that mentor. If you don't have that manager, be that manager. This is a way we can all show up as powerful leaders, not just to have an impact at work, but to have an impact on people's lives. With that, I'm going to stop with the way that I started. Thank you so much for this very, very powerful and important moment for me. Thank you for being here if this is talk you needed in a moment in your life. Thank you for being here as a leader, as part of this wonderful industry and part of FIT in even one small way. And thank you if you're here because of me. Thank you.
So first of all, I want to say welcome. It's really a big joy to see everybody back in person again, especially the alumni. And I want to say huge congratulations to Steph. This is her first event to launch the book, and I was at Stephanie and Cooper's wedding. I am probably the world's largest fan of her youngest son, Jamie, and I am also a big fan of her significant other, who has been her biggest cheerleader and supporter throughout their courtship and their marriage, and it really does take a village. And I am incredibly proud to say that she's a graduate of the program, but I'm also very proud of her for her role on the faculty and now as our first author, our first CHRO. So we're very, very very honored to be event number one on the train. So tonight we have a group of our alums who are also working parents who are going to speak along with Stephanie and answer questions. And we are, as we usually are, very honored to have our favorite friend in the press, Ellen Byron from the Wall Street Journal, as our moderator. So Ellen, why don't you come on up? And as you come up, I'm going to invite all of our panelists up, and I'm going to say something very briefly about all of them so that we can start the panel. So for 2 decades at the Wall Street Journal, Ellen Byron has chased consumer trends across continents, industries, age groups, and attitudes. Currently, she is Deputy Coverage Chief overseeing business news. As a reporter, she has held beats covering consumer product makers and retailers, including Procter & Gamble, Avon, Estee Lauder, and Macy's, and has written extensively on the wellness industry. And we're very happy to have her with us tonight, as she often is at Capstone for moderating our panel. Amelia Peng from Fresh, who is the Senior Director of Global Operations Marketing. Amelia is an international marketing and business development executive with over 15 years experience in beauty and CPG. She serves as the leader of Fresh's global operations marketing team. Prior to Fresh, Amelia worked as an associate brand manager at Mars Wrigley in China, where she successfully launched the chewing gum brand 5 Gum into the Chinese market. She's also responsible for the team that launched Fresh in the Chinese market. And of course, she is a 2020 grad of the master's program here at FIT. Corey Fenton, our one dad on the panel tonight. Corey's a new dad. Corey is currently the Assistant Vice President of U.S. Marketing for L'Oréal Paris Hair Care. Prior to joining the marketing team, Corey spent 9 years in L'Oréal USA's operations team, where he most recently led product development for hair care, hair color, and hair styling for the consumer products division. And prior to that, he spent 7 years in various manufacturing management roles at L'Oréal USA factories and is actually educated as an engineer. He earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Chemical Engineering from Bucknell and his Master's in Cosmetics and Fragrance Marketing and Management here at FIT in 2022. So he's just happy to be here and not be assigned any homework. Stephanie, by the way, is a 2011 graduate of our program. Getting up in years there, Steph. Emmie Salaj is currently the general manager for Tory Burch Beauty at Shiseido on a global level. She has 25 plus years of beauty industry experience. Before she joined Shiseido in 2015, she worked across multiple brands and categories there, Bare Minerals, Buxom, the BPI fragrance portfolio, and now Tory Burch. Prior to this, Emmie worked at both LVMH and L'Oréal USA in senior management positions, both in marketing and in sales. She was actually in sales when she entered the program, and she is a 2009 graduate of the master's program and along with Stephanie, a member of our industry advisory board. Last but not least, Tennille Kopiaz. Tennille has actually just joined our faculty as well and is, for the lucky graduates in the class of 2023, is teaching leadership this year with fellow alum Katerina Berzio. In 2018, Tennille joined Fresh as the Global Chief Marketing Officer. Prior to that, starting in 2015, Tennille joined the LVMH Group on Dior as the Senior Vice President of North America Marketing. Prior to Dior, she held senior marketing positions at Coty Prestige across their portfolio of fragrance brands in the US market, including Calvin Klein, Marc Jacobs, Chloe, Balenciaga, Bottega Veneta, Miu Miu, Davidoff, and the Kohl's proprietary brands Vera Wang and Jennifer Lopez. She began her career at L'Oréal USA, and was with L'Oréal when she completed our program in 2004, but she also has the distinction of being a double graduate of FIT and also is a graduate of our very, very proud Bachelor of Science program in Cosmetics and Fragrance Marketing. And Tennille was the 2013 inaugural recipient of the FIT MPS Alumni Award for Professional Excellence. She was also one of the honorees of the 25th anniversary event for the CFM bachelor's degree. So without any further ado, I will turn it over to Ellen and to our distinguished panel of graduates of the program. Thanks, Ellen.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I'm going to jump right in. So Stephanie tonight outlined 5 principles in her book. She lists them as perspective, balance, community, communication, and identity. I would love to hear in your experiences which principle especially resonated with you, and what advice would you give yourself in hindsight? Feel free to jump in any order.
I can start. I will first start by saying I acknowledge that I'm the only person on the panel that was not responsible for growing a human, but I think that it's a team sport, so I am happy to give the dad perspective. I think for me, the 2 principles are balance and communication. So whenever my wife became pregnant, I was in the midst of the last semester of graduate school. We had just bought a condo and I had just started a new job. So I think that paired with the fact that she had a very challenging first trimester, I think the fact that we were very good at communicating and understanding what each other had going on and the needs of each other, and then also just the amount of time in the day and being able to understand what the true priorities are and find balance in what was a priority for us. I think that made a huge difference.
I'll jump in. I think what probably resonates the most, and I have to say, listening to Stephanie hit so many different points. First off, it's been 20 years since I've been pregnant. So I remember when I was asked to kind of join this, I said, oh my God, it's been 20 years since I've been pregnant. What am I going to bring to this? And I have to say, over the course of the last couple of weeks, I've really had a chance to talk openly with new moms, friends that are pregnant, people that work with me that are going through the experience, thinking about pregnancy, all the stages that we're talking about. For me personally, I think identity is one that I get a little emotional on. I was a young mom. I was in my mid-20s, and knew from day one that I wanted to be a career mom. I don't think that there was any question in that. What I think was in question was, what is that all going to mean to me, my husband, the family that we were trying to bring, to life, and what would it mean to me and my own identity? And so a lot of what I think you review in the book hit home, touches those points, and I think it's, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about it, what I like and think I bring to the table today, one as a leader, as a mom. Just as an aside, I was talking to my 23-year-old son this morning about the topic. Like, that's telling, and hearing his point of view, how many years later. And I have to say, I have a lot of faith in the next generation. I really do, because I listen not only from my own children's perspective, but I see the evolution we've made, and we've made some progress. I think, quite respectfully, I think there is still much more to be done. But if I had to say one thing that I would, looking at my own perspective of being pregnant in the workforce, being driven, being all the wonderful things we like to talk about, I just wish I gave myself a little bit of a break. I wish I would have enjoyed what every piece of these elements meant to becoming Emmie today. I even said to my son, I wish I was pregnant today. I think I would enjoy it a lot more. I will not be, but I think for me, if there's anything, it's truly that self-identity that doesn't matter if you're in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, we're all gonna endure, but just being able to be okay with what that means in that moment and being relevant in that moment.
I can go next. So I would like to share a little bit about my story. When I was pregnant, I just moved from China to US, and I got my first job at Fresh. And then when I found out I was pregnant, it was literally the 3rd month when I was working there. So I was really nervous. I felt really, not secure. I was like, oh my God, what should I do? And we just booked the flight, to traveling back to China. So it was really a lot of things happening, and I'm still, getting used to what are differences, culture, perspective, like Chinese culture versus American culture. So a lot of things are happening all together, and I have a lot of thoughts in my mind, like worry about this, worry about that. And then there's one day I was like, okay, I need to talk about it with my line manager. So I was like, I have some news to share with you. I'm pregnant. And he was really happy for me. And I told him that I really worry about my flights, my business trip. This is my first job in US. And I just got here, 3 months. I'm so sorry about that. He was like, why are you so sorry? You don't have to be. And that moment I was like, yes, communication is very important. But also, we don't overthink. So this is really what I want to share, We are women, we should be proud, we also proud to be a pregnant working woman. So that's all I want to share here.
The word identity is also the same word for me. I didn't have a great time getting pregnant. It took me 7 years. I did lots of drugs, lots of IVF. There is a miracle child at the end. But a lot of people say, well, why are you so successful in your career? Is because I felt like I was failing in another area of my life. and it was a hidden thing to everyone, but I had my career. So I worked my ass off because I was failing, I felt like, in another part of my life that was secret. And then what's insane is I had a brand new baby and a brand new job. So my whole identity overnight went from like all work to having a child. And it's crazy, and especially the women that are in the audience that are pregnant, the second you hold that child, your priorities change. And until that child is physically here, you just don't get it. So your identity overnight is just something different, and you need to choose and have priorities. And kind of as Steph said, you can't feel guilty. So when you're there, you have to be there and present, and the same with your job, because you can't do it all. And I agree, there's no such thing as balance. It's choosing the priorities in the moment.
Each of you are managers in some way. How is your pregnancy, parenting experience informing your work as a manager?
I'll jump in. I think it's relative to my being a manager as a whole. We use the word communication, but it is about the openness of having that line of communication with your staff. I mean, 90% of my team are female. Many of them are young and probably, if not already in the stage of wanting to have children, certainly thinking about it. And as a woman, how can I pretend that that's not a conversation we would be having naturally? And the same applies to the men in my team. You know, they're becoming dads, you know, in many different ways. So, you know, I think you said it best, Steph. It's not just a mother or a father or a caretaker. Each one comes with its level of support and need. I think it's, as a manager, being able to have that conversation. I have a member on my team now who is going through IVF. And I've learned, it wasn't something that I endured personally, but I'm learning so much about what that entails and being okay with having that conversation with your team members. Because I remember, again, going back to that identity of, I'm not going to be less of an employee because I happen to be pregnant, but that's what I told myself. And I take that on. That's what I told myself. And it was interesting that the moment I remember my boss that I was pregnant, it was like, oh, okay, that's great. And I'm like, really? It's great? And it is something that we laugh about, and I'm sure many of us have done it and giggle, but it is something that we have to change, whether we're mothers, fathers, caretakers, whatever it be. I mean, now I've evolved into a next stage where I have parents that I have to, you know, think about. These are all moments in lives that are critical, but we as leaders now owe it to ourselves to flip that script that you talk about and ensure that we're leaving the opportunity and the discussion so that team members feel they can open up and talk to you more about it. So if anything, I do feel that that's something that my experiences have helped me evolve as a leader as well.
I think one thing that I talk about in the book that Ellen and I spoke about a little bit before is the idea that also, because it's a two-way conversation, you have to listen, not listen to just reply. And I know that I've told many of you that in class too. So when you have these difficult conversations, it's two ways. It's how are you going to serve up that information so that it makes sense to that person in the way that they receive it, and also making sure that we encourage people to truly listen. At the end of the day, if we really want people to bring their whole selves to work, it's a lot of energy, by the way, to not bring your whole self to work. I always think about that, like it's not a lot. But also there's a tremendous amount of energy that goes into saying just the right thing. But instead, if we encourage people to, how do you want to say this information, and also the listener to truly listen, then we're able to deliver and have those ongoing conversations that are in a safe and supportive place.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Stephanie. When I, as an editor, work with reporters at the Journal, I like to call memorable details that delight a reader. We call them chocolate chips. And one of my favorite chocolate chips in Stephanie's book is that advice to listen. Do not listen to reply. And I'd love to hear about how that plays out in practice. We all want to be better listeners, regardless of if it's a delicate conversation about pregnancy or some other delicate management matter. Can you talk, each of you, I can already tell our good listeners, can you talk about how you've seen that listen to listen moment play out in your workplaces?
I think just in life, we want to, as managers, be problem solution. And we're just always come to the point where it's like, okay, here's the problem, how am I going to solve it? Here's the problem, how am I going to solve it? So sometimes you don't have the resolution. So it's just to listen for sake of listening and maybe think about it before you have to act versus having that answer. And you don't always need the answer.
And you can ask the question. So what do you want me to do with this information? Am I just listening for you? Is there something you need right now? Or, is this something you want me to share with anybody else? That's a really helpful consideration too.
And I think whenever you go to work for a company and you go to work for a brand, but ultimately you're going to work for a manager. And if you feel that your manager really listens to you, I think it allows you to develop trust with them, and the trust that you develop with them ultimately empowers you to be as efficient as possible and to be able to do the best job. And I think that's really what every employee wants to do. So I think showing up and listening is the first step in the right direction of something that can be a very virtuous spiral.
Yeah, and on top of that, definitely, resonate about a lot of trust, and then also listening is really to build the personal level of the connection, and that's also very important because we're all humans. We work together 8 hours, 10 hours a day, so I think listening is also a really good way to connect and, to build the trust together.
The only thing I will add to that, because I could agree with everyone on the panel, I think for me, I'm just going to take it from the perspective as a parent. Boy, did I learn what it meant to listen to listen. So here I was, a mom of 2 incredible boys, making sure I managed every facet of their life, when they were eating, what they were doing, who they were with, and, obviously a bit of a control freak, yes, I admit. But what I realized as they started to evolve and become teenagers, that they needed a different type of parent, right? And I will say it did teach me a lot, that there are moments where they just wanted me to listen, maybe nudge a direction here or there, but really not have the answer. And I think, it sounds all, fine and great. We definitely had our rocket moments where things exploded in the house, but I think what I learned is I don't need to solve everything. And taking that into the workforce, because that's exactly what I realize of my teams. They have the answers. It's letting them get to those answers. So parenthood evolves in a lot of different ways, but for me, I give a lot of accolades to my sons who helped me understand that a little differently, and the world wasn't going to end because I didn't give them the way in which they should approach things, and the same, I think, applies in the workforce as well.
There was another aha moment for me in reading the book. So much of what we're writing about right now has to do with workplace productivity, workplace efficiency. These are buzzwords that we're hearing quarter after quarter about enhancing workplace productivity. And there are these statistics in the book that spell out that of the women who experienced any reported change in their work life during pregnancy, 69% said their confidence increased, and 80% of those women said they worked harder, a direct correlation of confidence and effort. And it made me think about this life stage that, as the statistics earlier tonight showed, so many workers in the workplace go through. In this stage is this moment of productivity and efficiency, and there are ways that you learn how to do your job faster, smarter, better, that I feel like carry through after your pregnancy is over. How have you experienced that here on the panel? Are there tricks of the trade that you learned when you were juggling this life moment that you've taken with you later down the line?
I think a lot of the students can attest it's very similar. When your time is finite, you somehow have to fit it all in, and you somehow, okay, you still want to get to the gym and you still want to go on out with your friends and out for dinner and do all this stuff, but you kind of like bucket it in and you become more productive. And so you have these finite moments, and ultimately when you're there to work and you just want to get it done really, really fast. And also I always say, don't overthink it. Instead of like redoing things and overanalyzing, it's good enough, move on. And you just start becoming faster and faster from the speed. But I think there's a lot of correlations as a graduate student managing a full-time job.
Anybody else, any tricks of the trade with work-life balance that maybe you were forced to contend with when you were grappling with pregnancy and that life moment that you've taken with you through your career?
I mean, I think about, I'll go back to pregnancy and how many days I just didn't feel well, realistically. I mean, we all go through it. Some pregnancies are better than others. And I think where you learn to become very efficient is in those hours where you did feel great, you were very good about getting work done. And by the way, that meant work at home, work at the office, whatever work. I do think that teaches you of what you can accomplish in shorter periods of time. It's not, I mean, if you think about it, who can honestly say that they're 100% engaged and focused 10 hours of the day? I mean, it's just not humanly possible, right? But it's learning how to evolve yourself. And you were talking a little bit about priorities. What are those priorities that kind of take precedence? I love when Stephanie says, you can't do it all at the same time. I mean, we all like to think we can, but we really don't. But, I used to joke, I'd have 20 balls in the air. If I keep 5 of them up, I'm doing all right, right? And learning to be okay with that. But the 5 that you choose have to stay up. You want to choose wisely, right? Because as a parent, you want to make sure you're not in any way not performing as a mother or a father or whatever it may be. And as an employee, you want to make sure you're not disappointing the people that are counting on you to deliver on that presentation. As a leader, you don't want to disappoint your teams. It is a lot. But really being okay with, you're going to have days where we all have had them. Oh my God, I was so productive today. I got 20 things off of the list. You're going to have days where you're lucky if you do 2 or 3. But we're human. It's okay. It's keeping that top of mind and again, being okay and reprioritizing as needed. That agility that we all love to talk about, it truly, for me, is, I think, a fundamental.
I think what's really powerful about what you're both saying is that for me, it's energy management a little bit more than time management. I'm not very good at time management. I'm not very good at balance. I can tell you all about it, but I'm not. But I'm really good at managing my energy. So in fact, and Cooper will attest to this entire book was written between 11 o'clock at night and 2 o'clock in the morning. Really, for 3 years. And 4,872 edits. And I kept track. But I love working on the book late at night. It's where my headspace was super clear, was completely uninterrupted, and I really feel like the pandemic had this very weird thing where we knew, okay, I'm behind my screen. When I'm working from home, I like to do things this way. Now we have this new thing where we're like, okay, when I'm in the office, I like to use my energy this way. For me, it was also like, okay, I'm going to stop working at 6, and I'm going to have quality time with my sons. Then I know that I'm going to switch back on later. But instead of kind of always trying to cram everything in and having I try to manage that type of energy. I mean, Katie, my unbelievable assistant, knows. Also, I know I can project when the meltdown is going to happen, and it happens. And we kind of look at the calendar and go, all right, that's going to be where the meltdown is going to happen. And that morning, I try to plan less. I go for a run. I take my kids to school. I do anything else just to give my headspace. But I kind of anticipate that. It's like, okay, this is going to be a rough week. I'm going to plan for that so that I can have it in a different way. So I just think, right now we're in Mental Health Awareness Month. Burnout is very, very real. There are little micro moments of burnout, though, you need to recognize. And in fact, if you can anticipate and have energy management throughout your day and not always chasing the balance or chasing that, it can be incredibly helpful. And if you feel stuck and you're in a moment and you're not feeling productive sitting at your computer screen staring at the thousands of emails, maybe that's not the right time to do that. Is there any way you can reconfigure your day or your calendar so that you can make it happen in those ways when you do feel that energy? Or what can you do to shift that energy that you're feeling. And for me, that's been really powerful and something that I certainly have felt the prioritization has pushed me for, the balance has pushed me for. I think the way we work has changed, but also my stage that I'm in with my kids right now, too.
Great. Thank you all so much for sharing your perspective. Stephanie, if there are any closing points that you'd like to make, feel free, but I think we've learned so many things that go well beyond even the pregnancy stage, just about being better community members in the workplace.
I can't say thank you enough again, and also just admire and respect that all of us are here having this conversation, and to thank the panel, to thank you, Ellen, to thank everyone's curiosity and openness to thinking about something like this. It's not an easy topic. By the way, having focus groups with college-age men talking about pregnancy, that was a tricky one. But if I can convince them to talk about it, then maybe we can talk about it at work. So thank you all so much for having these confident conversations. I encourage you to continue to have them. And thank you for being part of this really special moment for me. This is a big one. Thank you.
So I just want to close by especially thanking CAFAA, the Cosmetics and Fragrance Alumni Association, Morgan, our chair, and I want to recognize all the alumni that are here tonight, and especially those on our faculty. I don't know if you're aware, but only one member of our faculty is not a graduate of the program, and among the adjunct faculty numbers that teach on the program. So we not only are very proud of our graduates, but we put them in the classroom to give back and pay it forward. And this is the first of what I hope will be many book events of interesting topics that our alumni share their wisdom on with the rest of the world. So we're always here for you. We are always your cheerleaders and your PR agency anyway, but we're always here to promote whatever amazing things you all are doing. So it's a joy to see you all here tonight. Please join us in the lower lobby for a reception this evening, and to, if you have any further questions for the panelists, and certainly to congratulate Stephanie. And the only reason that you should not go out and buy a copy of Carrie Strong on May 23rd is if you know you're going to be a guest lecturer in one of our courses before the end of spring term, because we love the book so much we bought 100 copies for Stephanie to sign and give as gifts to all of our guest speakers. So thank you all for being here, and please join us around the corner. And Morgan, I hope this is one of many events to come this summer and fall. So thank you all.